Welcome to Bachademia, a podcast so educational two professors could be hosting it. Hi, I'm Dr. Danielle McGeough, and joining me is Dr. Bill Henneman. Welcome to Bachademia. This week we have a special guest making her second appearance on the podcast, Aunt B, otherwise known as Briana McGeough. She is an assistant professor at the University of Kansas in the School of Social Welfare. Briana, what else should we know about you?
I think you've hit the high points. I secretly didn't watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette until being brought into the fold of this incredible production. But yeah, I'm an assistant professor of social welfare, study mental health interventions for LGBTQ populations, and watch a lot of garbage television.
Yeah, she's also a master punner.
Yes.
She makes the best of puns.
I've heard that, so I'm excited.
Yes. Her Facebook presence is a delight, very full of puns. So if you need more puns in your life, if you're an aspiring dad with dad jokes, Briana's Facebook brings it.
She's actually like top 3 maybe of like ads I've had in the last year of like ones that make me not like Facebook is a garbage heap that needs to be dumped. Like you a little bit restore my faith in like the actual utility of that social media.
That's the kindest thing I've ever heard.
I'm a giver.
So I have a question for this week, and it is, if you were on The Bachelor or Bachelorette for the wrong reason, what would that reason be?
I thought 2. I have 2. Can I go first? Because they're really good and I don't want them taken from me. 1, it would be to promote this podcast. 2, it would be to get D3's motivational speaking career off the ground. It would just be me. Like, we should bring my friend Danielle on to do some motivational speaking. What do you guys think? Those would be the 2 main reasons I can think of.
What a co-host. What a co-host. What about you, Briana? What wrong reasons would you go on The Bachelorette for?
So one is, as someone who studies LGBTQ mental health, I'm running a clinical trial at the moment and trying to recruit folks to participate in my group. If folks want to, email lgbtqsmart@ku.edu. That is lgbtqsmart@ku.edu. And really just bringing folks in to my treatment research regimen. Also, the other thing that I think has been somewhat spoiled in this conversation would just be to like bring puns to the masses. Just thinking of the millions of living rooms that could be brought my humor. I think that could be really beneficial. I would also like to be vulnerable right now and say that originally I had come on this podcast for the wrong reasons, that it wasn't a love of The Bachelor, but rather that I had a colleague who I discovered was really into The Bachelor.
I forgot about this.
Research collaboration with, and thought that if I appeared on this podcast, I could somehow like appeal to her. It worked, by the way. So these wrong reasons were effective. We're well on our way to having a manuscript out the door. So I just want to, I too am using this platform to advance my career.
See, that's not the wrong reason for us. I feel like Danielle and I, shameless. We want sponsorships. We want people to get ahead in life. Yeah.
We are just here to build people up on this podcast.
And start Danielle's motivational speaking career.
And that too, which will also build people up, because that's what I would do as a motivational speaker. Go get them, folks. Go get them. I think that my wrong reason would be something really like, just like I'm just there for the food or something, like it's like I just needed a vacation and some good food, and like that's why I'm there. Screw love when you could have free lobster. I don't know.
I would for sure be the person that they'd be like, every scene that guy's eating something, because like when I go to a party, my goal is to make sure that I eat the most food out of anyone. Like I want to like really dislike myself by the end of it, like just feel disgusting. I love hors d'oeuvres because I can eat so many of them. It's a quantity, not a quality thing.
That makes sense. Upon, the sheer number of times that being here for the wrong reasons came up, I had asked my partner Skylar if he was in a relationship for the wrong reasons, and he revealed that he is. That I sometimes buy him jelly beans, and that is what has kept him in the relationship. Oh my God, could be worse.
Why not enter a long-term relationship for jelly beans? I mean, there's worse reasons to stick around a marriage, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it all seems very appropriate. But yeah, like I suppose like he moved from California to Kansas, I guess, for jelly beans.
Those must be some damn good jelly beans.
Tell us your brand. Tell us your brand. So this episode does start with Karl's accusation that men are there for the wrong reason. And this is shocking and appalling because that never happens on this show. But Katie does decide to call the evening short and move right to the rose ceremony. And after that, she kind of steps away for a moment. Greg comes in to check on her. And then Karl, I wrote air boxes in my notes, but shadow boxing, I guess, is the appropriate
And Danielle, can you give us a demonstration of yes? Yes, exactly.
It's somewhere, my shadow boxing is somewhere in between a very hyper cheerleader and something that's reminiscent of boxing. It's like a shadow of boxing, if you will. Sorry, I was proud of that one. So then they move to the rose ceremony, and I think that the men unionize. So at one point, I think it was Mike who said, "We have a responsibility as a unit to protect the queen." And I was just like, what show am I watching? Is this like, I'm reading the book Shadow and Bone right now, and I'm like, are we on the wrong show? Like, no, we weren't. I loved the dramatic aspect of this.
I was like, did we flip over to Game of Thrones? Like, is something happening in Westeros that I didn't know? Like, yeah, I didn't get it. But I like the unionization. That is what happened. They're like, we're going to vote you out, Karl.
I really kind of like this, like, we are a unit. We must protect the queen. Also, of course, Mike is also the person who revealed that he's a virgin. I kind of find it unsurprising that the virgin would also go on and on about his duty to protect our fair maiden, Katie. So he very dramatically interrupts the rose ceremony to call Karl out as a unit, to have Karl called out. What were you all thinking when this went down?
It was painful. Like I think of all of the drums, it was just very hard for me to perceive any value to it. Because I don't know, Karl said some weird stuff, but was unwilling to give any sort of specifics. But it's like, I just don't want to start stuff. But it was like so obvious that was the direction we were on, and then Katie was so flustered by it. Then I'm like, I don't know, there are like complicated life problems, and then there's this situation, and it just seemed so flat.
It seemed like a lot of work for a guy that clearly had no chance. Like, I put him in the same realm as Victoria the Queen, where it's like neither one had a chance. I wish he could have stayed longer because he was entertaining, but I don't feel like the guys really needed to unionize. I also appreciated when Katie was like, does everyone feel this way? And like, nobody really, like, they kind of did like the sheepish yes, but no one was like, it wasn't like Spartacus where they're like, send him home. So yeah, there you go.
have we seen other interruptions in a rose ceremony quite like this? I felt like this was like a bachelorette first.
I thought so too. I don't think I've ever seen people like jump as a group like that and just wholesale, they'll complain and they throw shady looks, but I've never seen this like we're sending our representative forward.
So then like we have this awkward moment where, Katie's like, all right, I need a moment. And then she's talking to Caitlin and Tasha, and she says, well, I plan to keep Karl. And I'm just like, no, girl, like he's gotta go. And so she does go out, she resumes the rose ceremony. So I have like a little side note. I really think that Christian looks like he should be in a British rom-com. I think he has very strong Hugh Grant vibes. But then so I was like looking on Twitter, and there's these whole series of like Twitter posts that are like, Christian looks like he's always seasick. And it's like pictures of him just looking slightly ill.
Is he the smaller guy that's got like the big tattoo that says Vic? I gotta look his picture up here.
I think he's got like, he looks like Hugh Grant. He's got like blonde hair. He's got like the swoopy middle part thing.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I agree with that. The guy who has the big arm tattoo that says Vic, Kim Hanna, who will be co-hosting next week, said that she thinks he looks like Fievel from An American Tail. And once I saw that, I was like, okay, I got it. I agree.
We
Christian
haven't.
Sorry. I think Christian has like long lost member of the Backstreet Boys energy to him.
Ooh.
It had like a very 90s boy band vibe to me.
Oh my gosh, there was a kid playing at the park with Harper the other day that like looked like straight out of a 90s boy band. He was blonde. He had like, how there was that 90s haircut that was like kind of like the bowl cut, but then you started in the middle. He had that on, and he was like in like this like black athletic jumpsuit thingy. And I was like waiting for him to dance, but I digress.
Hunter looks like Fievel.
Hunter. Okay. Yeah. Hunter has an awesome sleeve. His tattoo.
But it says Vic, and who is Vic? That's what I want to know. It says
maybe he will share in a story circle about Vic. I don't know. So Karl, Kyle, and John go home. Surprised by any of these?
Yeah, I thought John was in it for the long haul.
Really?
Yeah. I thought John was going to be a finalist. I thought he had the perfect amount of like smiley, good looking, non-controversial. Like I thought he was just going to coast on in. I was wrong. What do I know? Why are you people even listening? Getting any useful content from me.
So can we talk about like Karl's dramatic exit? Like what was that? He like stood right in front, like it's like he walked in front of her, turned his back to her, and then like walked off without hugging her or anything. It was so bizarre. And what made it even more bizarre to me was that it felt like no one was responding to that moment.
It was amazing. If you're gonna walk off that way, right?
He had also moments ago said, didn't he, that like if he got told to leave, is going to take like the military to get him out. And so it felt like it was like a bold transition from like the military is going to need to swoop in to like I just kind of walked away and no one responded.
Yep.
How awesome would it have been if he would have shadow boxed his way out?
Or like walked by her and did like the like walked like into the sunset.
Oh my.
Or from the Breakfast Club, like he did like as he like walked out.
Well, it's sort of like, why are you turning your back on her?
I don't
like it was the guys, if anything, that he should have been mad at. And I was like, Karl, you ain't there for the right reason.
Yeah, he clearly wasn't.
Dude. So there's a group date and they announce it and they bring out the card And the men like have a mild freak out because she signed it ... instead of with a heart. You know, the ellipses are the most anxiety producing of punctuation. I was just like, is it just that intense in the house?
I don't know.
I don't know. Oh, wow. Poor guys got ellipses instead of a heart. So then they get taken to their date, and it is a story circle led by Nick Vale. Okay, thoughts on story circles. And Bill, we did a poll. Tell us about the poll. And
yeah. So my question was, is this a good way to learn about a potential partner? Yes, no, needs better questions. And no, so we had about 50 respondents. About 60% said no, about 40% said yes, and then there was 20%, no wait, 60-40. Sorry, there's about 60%, 35% said yes, and then about 5% said need better questions. So fairly split. My problem is, what the hell is Nick Vale? Like, what? There's a lot of is he a therapist? No. 2, why is he dressed like that? And 3, does anyone like him? I wish Karl would have shadow boxed him in the face. I do not like Nick Vale. That guy has been on the show. It's like he clearly just wants to be on the show, and they'll just keep giving him opportunities. At this point, he needs a counselor to help him with his addiction to the Bachelor franchise. I'm done. I'm out.
Thoughts, Briana?
Yeah, I think one of those thoughts you brought up came to mind. Like, I am a trained therapist, and I'm like, it's almost like we took therapy, but rather than have a therapist, just brought some random guy from The Bachelor, who I perceived to be there for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
So,
if he is a therapist, we need to contact whatever accrediting body he is like licensed with and jerk his freaking license. Like, this guy is not doing anyone favors on this show.
So here's my issue as someone who has developed methods for doing story circles. And I think that story circles are a wonderful way to create connections. And so, but here's where and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but one, typically in story circles, you would have a series of prompts that you would give so that people can opt into the prompt that best works for them. And near as I could tell, the prompt was tell a story about something you're not proud of, right? And usually you would give a variety of prompts that would maybe say something like, tell a story about a time that you weren't proud of what you did, or a time that you were proud of yourself, right? So you can let them take it to either like a negative or a positive thing. And typically there's different sort of like levels of self-disclosure that different prompts might bring. And so I don't know if we weren't granted that as viewers, or if they just didn't have it. So for me, bringing people on to this date where it seems like they were given the choice to share or not share based on some things that Katie had said and things like that. But there's a lot of peer pressure to share, and a lot at stake to choose not to share. So I sort of felt like they should have at least had a wider variety of prompts available for them to decide how to share, if that makes sense. So Hunter talks about his divorce. Some other men share stories about lost trust, working too much, mistakes that they've made. Yes. And so then Thomas uses the story circle to sort of declare his feelings for Katie and admit that he didn't come on The Bachelor for love, but
which are the right reasons. Apparently, love is the
he
right
likes reason. Her. So it's all okay, because once he saw her, he was a changed man.
It's the start of your rom-com. Like it's the right, like he's on for the wrong reasons and they fall in love and Grant looking dude comes in somehow.
Absolutely. So like thoughts about his admission. I just thought his smile was creepy.
So I did have some thoughts. One is I do think the situation was so artificial and so awkward. And I do think there was just such a lack of elements of choice that like my temptation is to not judge him too harshly. Like I think, you know, one of those like pulling my therapist hat a little bit. There are a lot of reasons that folks like smile in inappropriate times. And a lot of those are responses to anxiety or trauma. And so I think because of that, I'm not from that alone ready to judge that like he's a nefarious character. I think I also thought the thing he said was probably pretty reasonable, which was like, I'd never met you before. I didn't know if I was gonna fall in love with you, but I thought it'd be fun to be on TV. And like that seemed reasonable enough to me in this sort of show where I would argue the parameters around love are pretty bizarre. That like I actually thought that was like a pretty reasonable reaction to the thing he was asked.
I think it shows a lack of understanding what is going on, but a level of honesty, right? So I feel like he was being honest and genuine and like, I don't know, he is like, yeah, hey, I'll be the Bachelor. I don't think he understands the game, and to say, oh, this isn't a game. It's like, oh, it's a game. And you don't get what's going on here by saying, yeah, I came on to try to be the Bachelor. You're kind of screwing yourself. Bold move, Cotton. I appreciate it, but I don't think it's going to help him in the end.
He has adorable ears. His ears kind of like stick out, and I think they're really cute.
Elaine said he looks like Oscar from The Office, but like an attractive, like if Oscar was turned into like a really handsome movie star.
I totally see that.
Yeah. When she said it, I was like, oh dang, yeah.
So after this, we have Connor. He talks about his experiences with drinking and anger, and then he discloses that he cheated on his then girlfriend. I guess any comments about that moment?
They were all sharing stuff. I mean, yeah, I guess maybe the thing for me is it's less about what they share and more about what they explain, how that changes them as a person, because what you don't want is to end up dating or marrying somebody who's going to make this like a habitual, thing. So it's like, I cheated on my girlfriend. Here's why, here's what I've done to fix it. So if we're actually assuming this was useful in any way, which I'm still not sold.
So I thought that Connor shared his experience thoughtfully, and I think that I think he's pretty sharp, and I can kind of just tell that by the way that he reflects on his own experiences, as well as he has a pretty good vocabulary for someone on The Bachelor. But so Katie follows up and she discloses that she was sexually assaulted. So my questions kind of for you all is, how did you think that ABC handled this disclosure? Should they have provided a trigger warning, more resources? Like they did show, like they provided like a RAIN resource, and that was also tweeted.
I was interested that she used the term consent wasn't given, but didn't use the term sexual assault. And so I didn't know if that was a legal thing, if that was something, and again, it's her story. So however she wants to tell it, I'm fully supportive, but taking kind of the step back look and me thinking about, how do we address sexual assault, labeling something a sexual assault, labeling something sexual assault when it is sexual assault is important, because I am always concerned when people are like, they weasel around it, like, well, it was ambiguous. And so I was interested in that, not in any way critiquing her, but I also felt like there should have been a trigger warning. And you could tell that it was getting built up. There were several articles about there's going to be this big thing, and she's going to talk about something that's really important. And Danielle and I had text back and forth, and we had kind of thought, well, maybe she was at some point sexually assaulted, maybe she identifies somewhere in the LGBTQ plus community. But it got people pulled in, and the issue with that is you could pull somebody in who's had some pretty traumatic experiences, and they had no idea what they were getting into. So
go ahead, Briana.
Yeah, I agree that I think a content warning could have been valuable. And yeah, I also had noticed that around the language, and I don't know if for her it was concerned about using the language of sexual assault make her feel like she's in a position of being a victim versus using more active language around that. But I really have no idea.
One of the things that I appreciated about that she mentioned in her story was that afterwards she was in a relationship with a person who assaulted her. And I think that is something that is very common and isn't always talked about. Sometimes we recognize that people are already in a relationship and then it happens, but we don't always talk about how afterwards a relationship might form and how that might be a process of making sense or denying of sort of what had happened to a person. And so I really appreciated the way that she shared that aspect of the story, because I think that it's not part of the story that we hear talked about quite as much in public. So
yeah, and I don't think people think about how intertwined that sexual assault can be. It could be by a family member, it could be by someone in your friend circle. And so to come out and talk about it, that could end up in you losing friends. And so sometimes I think we have this very flat view of sexual assault. It happened, and then you talk about it and then it's over. And even you could tell she's still processing what it means to her, where she talked about its impact on her sex life and things like that. So I thought that was really good and important, and, very brave of her to just come out and talk about that.
Well, and I also appreciated in some ways that she didn't. So it sounds like this wasn't incredibly planned. So they're doing the story circle. It was up to her if she also is going to share a story. And I do think that her asking the men to tell stories and her reciprocating, now she didn't have to reciprocate with that particular story, but like that, I think that was like a meaningful thing in terms of establishing trust between her and the group. But she also does talk about how she had to work to sort of develop her sex positive, viewpoint post this experience. So Briana, could you tell us a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about sex positivity, but I know that you have some insights on that as well. So could you share with us a little bit about that?
And this is going to be
extra credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that stuck out for me is so often people talk about sex positivity as about having as much sex as possible, or having sex with as many people as possible, or just talking about sex as sort of like loudly as possible. And I think there's some ways that like Katie's persona sometimes captures some of that, bringing the vibrator on to her like premiere on The Bachelor. But I think it's a lot more nuanced and complex than that. And there isn't a universal definition, but I was doing a little bit of a deep dive online. I found that like the definition that kept popping up was that sex positivity is an attitude towards human sexuality that regards consensual sexual activities as fundamentally healthy and pleasurable, and encouraging sexual pleasure and experimentation. And the thing I really like about that definition is that it centers consent. But I think even that misses conveying some of the aspects of sex positivity that I think are really important, including affirming that I think sex positivity requires affirming what one doesn't want from sex. I think this definition also misses the importance of the like individual and societal level conversations around sex that I think are also a really important part about sex positivity. And so Dr. Sophia Whitehead provides a definition that sex positivity is about being non-judgmental, openly communicating and reducing embarrassment around sexuality in its many forms. And I really like this bit about the importance of communicating without shame. And that I want to emphasize that this often involves communicating boundaries, giving consent, but also not giving consent, and the importance of respecting those boundaries. And I think this actually has been showing up a lot in this season. So I actually found one of the more sex positive conversations to be when Katie and Mike, who's the person who wants to save sex until marriage, have a discussion about their like rather different perspectives on sex. And I just really loved how like mutually respectful they were in their like very different perspectives. So like that felt like a really nice illustration of sex positivity that isn't necessarily some of the like more loud and like forward sexuality forward elements. I also think when Katie was discussing the like difficult exploration of her sexuality after that non-consensual sexual experience, that sort of navigating what her boundaries were and how they changed and what she wanted her sexuality to be, like that felt like an important sex positive reflection process, even if it wasn't having as much sex as maybe she had in other periods of her life. I also want to note that I've noticed a number of men have asked for consent before kissing. And I think that is, again, an important part about explicit communication and boundaries that in my mind is really part of sex positivity. I think the other thing that I think is important to think about is that communication doesn't necessarily just have to be between sexual partners. And then I think it can also be part of bigger group conversations or policies. So for instance, a big part of sex positivity is healthy conversation between children and their families about developing sexuality, or teachers and students through sex ed, and even the policies that support having inclusive sex ed curricula. I also think messages affirming LGBTQA community, including asexual members of the community, the conversations that we have, representations in the media, and then policies sort of affirming LGBTQA lives are also really important parts of sex positivity. And I think, yeah, just to summarize some of the key points here, I really like another thing that Dr. Whitehead wrote in one of her essays on this topic, that sex positivity isn't just about shouting sex stories or always thinking sex is great. It's about recognizing and affirming the sexual aspect of each person's identity with all its nuances, wants, questions, and needs, shame, and stigma-free.
Go sex positivity. That was great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Briana. I really appreciate it, especially thinking about the way that sex positivity can be group discussions or collective discussions and policies. Like what does sex positivity look like in policies that we support? So thank you for that.
Of course.
Yay. So after this, there's kind of a little bit of a break from the group date, and they take us back to where the men are staying. And there's this scene where the men are sitting on their workout mats, and Michael discloses his experience losing his wife to breast cancer. And I thought that this was like such an interesting contrast to the story circle, where it's these men just sitting around and unprompted sort of choosing to disclose. So I thought this was an important moment on the show. Thoughts or reactions to that scene?
I thought it was, yeah, I mean, it was good. He felt like he needed to get it off his chest. The guy seemed really receptive to it. And I think it's always good to model that.
Okay, so I have a little bit of an extra credit for you all too. And I don't want to hit people with this is too much
extra credit.
I mean, this is the Bachademia podcast.
Damn you for making us learn.
So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about storytelling, identity, and performative vulnerability. So storytelling, it helps structure our experiences. So especially if we have kind of a chaotic experience or something like that, putting that experience into the form of a story can be really important for meaning making. It engages us in individual reflexivity. In other words, like we learn about ourselves through the stories that we tell. And it also, they can increase our capacity for empathy. So it helps us understand or take on perspectives of other people. But storytelling also engages us in cultural productions and reproductions of identities and experiences. So how we tell stories, what we choose to include, what we choose to exclude in the stories that we tell all matters. So when we think about Katie's disclosure or Michael's disclosure, like how we talk about loss, how we talk about sexual experiences, all of those things kind of matter. And it's not just our individual choices about the stories that we tell, but also cultural norms that influence how we tell those stories. And then storytelling too isn't just about the person telling, it can also be about people's responses. So how do the men respond to Michael? They're actually really supportive, I think. The other Mike reaches over and like touches his knee. And I think like that's like a really important moment in the storytelling, that storytelling is it's a collective experience. Like it's not just about the teller, it's about people's response to it. And then also just not the response that we see on the show, but then like how do people respond to these stories on Twitter, on other social media, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about the storytelling event, if you will, it includes sort of all of these. Interestingly enough, like even in like the late, so there's like lots of concerns right now. You kind of hear in popular discourse about storytelling. Like, are we telling too many stories, right? Like, and it's are we obsessed with telling our stories, right? And it's kind of an interesting thing because clear back even in the late 1990s, performance and storytelling scholars were already talking about the proliferation of storytelling. I'm trying to think of her name, but like there's this woman that talked about like storytelling is how we get a life, right? That like we create a life through the stories that we tell about our lives. And then there's like Linda Kaufman went as far as to describe testimony as fatally alluring, right? So this has been something that has been a concern for a while. And what I was like really intrigued by is I kept hearing this phrase kind of coming up, that this was performative vulnerability, right? That like what we were experiencing in the show was performative vulnerability. And in other words, this concern that people were kind of sharing their stories to get something. So I wanted to look it up and see if scholars were like were writing about it. There are two peer-reviewed journals that talk about performative vulnerability, though in very, very different contexts. So one is actually related to climate change and the other one is talking about refugees. So it's talking about it a little bit differently for a couple of reasons. One, collectively, we are misusing the word performative right now. So the word performative actually is typically used to make something. It means to make something, not to fake something. But when we're talking about performative activism or performative vulnerability, they're talking about faking vulnerability here. What I came across though is, so performative vulnerability is when you share because you think that you have to share to be loved or cared about. You maybe share because you think it's the only way to connect. You typically do this really quickly. And then at the end, you might feel more drained than energized. And I will say, like, Katie said that she felt pretty energized and liberated after sharing. There's also people talking about vulnerability porn or something called sad fishing. And this is where you engage in a state of being exposed emotionally or psychologically for reward validation from others. So people are kind of talking about using vulnerability as a way to sell products or a way, yeah, like it's like how you get something that you want, whether that's followers or whatever. And so I just thought that, and I went to, Brene Brown has a good interview with Adam Grant on, who's the author of Think Again and some other really wonderful books, but where she talks about what vulnerability is not. And she says vulnerability minus boundaries is not vulnerability. And she said that like you have to think about what your intentions are with sharing. And so what I've sort of been thinking about is, well, how do we know what people's intentions are? Because like you really don't. So what you can practice yourself is making sure that you're clear about what your intentions are with sharing, and that you aren't sharing because you expect some sort of reward for sharing. And also like if you aren't vulnerable in sharing, it's not vulnerability, right? Like I kind of think about it, I disclose all the time. So like it's not vulnerable for me to disclose certain things because I'm not feeling vulnerable in sharing, right? So what is vulnerable for different people is different, but also that like maybe we can't guess what other people's intentions are, but we can be clear about what our own intentions are. So I don't know, that's my extra credit for today on storytelling, identity, and performative vulnerability. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Good job.
Yeah. Whew, I feel like I've talked a lot. So the show moves back to the evening portion of the group date, and Katie is wearing a very big suit jacket over her dress.
And there was a real debate in our house if that was a suit jacket or if it was an attempt at fashion. We came down on the attempt at fashion. And that's what Danielle said as well. She wasn't at my house, but we were texting. And then you said you don't understand youth fashion.
I don't. It was like a really big, it sort of like was an unstructured 80s suit jacket.
Yeah.
Brianna, it was like a suit jacket that your mom would have bought for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And for like a 6'6", 300-pound man too. Like it was giant.
Like I still can't wear a lot of the clothes my mom bought me in kindergarten. She's like, you'll grow into them, but like I'm in my 30s, 6 feet tall, and like still can't wear a lot of those clothes. So yeah, Danielle is not wrong. That yeah, very much had that vibe to it.
It's like a family thing. Ryan does the same thing with our kids.
Okay.
He like will buy like Harper, shoes that like are the size of his feet. It's really funny. We laugh about them. But I will say, as someone who has to buy my kids clothes like every 3 months because they grow so fast, it does help to buy them extra big. But this suit coat did look like something that would have been bought by Coral or Ryan McGeough.
But yes, so maybe when Katie grows to be like 7'3", it will just fit her better.
Yes. But yes, so I thought that was peculiar. But so she has like a conversation with Connor and then Thomas. But Thomas doesn't feel like his conversation goes well. So he decides to creep in on Aaron. And it was like the funniest thing because like it was like he's pacing in the background. And so then he meets with Katie again. Thoughts about Thomas at this point? Is he genuine? What's going on here? He say he tells her that he's falling in love.
Yeah, he said, I'm not going to say it, but I'm getting there or something, or I'm not going to say the word, but I'm getting there. Or, yeah, I don't know. I think it says something about Aaron. Aaron seems to have a problem with Thomas, and he had a problem with Karl. And I just feel like Aaron's going to have a problem with somebody every single week until he's the last person. And yeah, Aaron needs to worry about Aaron.
Thoughts? Are you still non-judgmental about Thomas, Brianna?
So none of that came across well, but I think there was this framing from other folks that Thomas was somehow like a master manipulator. And like that hypothesis, I don't think is supported given how just like incredibly clumsy the whole thing was. That yeah, I just don't really know what to make of it. Like I think that he probably regrets having said, I could talk all day about the like red flags, and then when Katie's like, tell me more about that, he's like, I don't know. Yeah, it just seems like I don't think it's like the like slick like salesman thing that like other folks are framing it as. But yeah, I can't tell if it's like inauthenticity or just like Bill said earlier, just like playing the game very ineffectively, like playing the game but having a very poor understanding of the rules.
I appreciate that Katie doesn't let him get by. Like at one point he said something and she said, well, you're not really answering my question, which I was like, yeah, good for you. Like, don't let him get away with like the kind of skirting around it. And maybe he doesn't know he's doing it. That's the other thing, you know, maybe his whole life he's been able to do it and it's good to call him out. But yeah.
Was it Aaron that at one point described him as a cancer that needed to be cut out?
And,
I was like,
and a sociopath. Yeah.
I was like, damn.
Yeah. It got intense.
Way to escalate the situation. I did read like a tweet that I empathized with that said something to the effect of, I'm really uncomfortable with the way that Aaron talks about other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, like I don't feel like we need Thomas to continue being on the show. Like it's just hard for me to imagine that this is going to end in an engagement.
Right.
But I mean, I'm not sure that I agree that he's like a cancer that needs to be cut out or a sociopath. I think we've maybe reached some of these conclusions prematurely.
Well, I think Thomas, so maybe we just skip on, well, not skip, but we talk about the whole Aaron and Thomas thing, because I feel like that's really what it's become, right? It's like those two, but he was like, you know, he's actually really smart. And it's like, that was the one begrudging comment he could give him. And then he basically was like, and he's using it to manipulate us with his mind. And it's like, I don't think Thomas, I think he just is like smiley and like doesn't want to say anything offensive to anyone. And his one misstep was that he didn't realize what he was going to say was going to be an offensive, or it was going to be offensive to the group. And I think that at that point, the group just wants to find something offensive. I mean, I think we've all been in that position, right? Once you like dislike someone to a point, they could come in and be like, how are you doing, Bill? It's like, listen up, dick face. You don't need to know my emotions on any given day. Like, you know, like once you someone lose favor with a group, the whole group will just find anything to dislike them about.
Well, I think, you know, because, you know, I'll just take us there. You know, they ask him, well, did you think about becoming the Bachelor before you came on? And he's like, well, yeah. And kind of like Briana said earlier, there's like a part of you that you're like, of course people do.
Every one of them did. Who was like, if this doesn't work out, maybe I make it into the top 4 and I get to be the Bachelor. Yeah.
Right. And so like, but you do feel like his misstep isn't necessarily the honesty, but like his like being or something. I don't know. I did think that Nick Vale had a tweet that as much as you hate him, I do think it was insightful, Bill. He said, I don't think that Thomas said anything wrong in the group. What he did wrong was he always talked to Katie about their relationship, not with Katie about the relationship. And I kind of noticed that too, that he's sort of like, he would kind of dictate where they were rather than like ask or like, I don't know. I kind of was feeling that.
Well, because I've turned on Nick Vale and I'm going to use Thomas's or Aaron's way of doing this, it's like what he said was insightful, but it came out of his stupid face and mouth and I just can't stand it. Also, I'm on a lot of prednisone right now because I have an ear infection and just everything's making me ragey. Yeah.
I was hoping that Ragey Bill would make an appearance on the podcast today. So Michael gets the date card and first they drive this car thing. What are those things called?
I think it was like a UTV, like an all-terrain or an ATV or dune buggy. I don't know.
Oh, dune buggy. That's what I was looking
But that's like the third thing she's gotten hurt or like flipped, right? Like wasn't she on the 4-wheeler when it flipped with what's his name?
I think that was a different contestant. I think maybe.
Okay.
I just thought it was funny that she flipped and then while they were on it, she was like, I'm a good driver. And then when they were done, she was like, oh yeah, BTW. I like flipped this thing.
I appreciate how game she is because she rolled it and they're like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, you know.
So they seem to have a pretty good date. That evening at dinner, Michael does tell Katie about his wife's death. I really love the moment where he says, they say that this ends an engagement, but I think this begins with an engagement, because it was like so corny, and like, you know that the show is going to replay it like 50 million times now.
If he makes it pretty far.
So what do you all think about Michael? Do you think they have a connection? Do you like him? Tell me your thoughts.
I feel like I'm being baited.
So,
Go for it, Briana.
Admittedly, like, you know, I didn't feel so comfortable judging Thomas. I feel like extra uncomfortable judging the guy with like the incredibly tragic widowing backstory. But I don't know. I did feel like they engaged in really authentic ways around that. And I think specifically some of the conversation around like, you know, his deceased wife will like always be part of him, but like Katie articulating the ways that like their love would be different. I don't know, felt really sweet and sincere. And so yeah, I imagine like one, I just really liked the dynamic of that conversation. But I also just think it's going to be really brutal to kick that guy off the show, particularly with lines of like, how blessed am I to be able to fall in love twice? Like, it just does not feel good to get rid of that guy.
I am concerned, especially with the research around like really emotionally charged experiences and how people misattribute that attraction. And so it's like he tells you the story and he comes across, and he probably is this like awesome guy. His wife passed away from cancer. He took care of her. Now he's got his kid. And it's like, you wonder, like, that is a person you can really like and should be liked. Is it the person that you want to spend a good portion of your life with? Because he could do that, but also be a mouth open chewer, or, you know, just have all these unsavory habits. And it's like, he could disagree with you on how you manage money, how you divide housework. And then it's like, but I'll stick by you if you get cancer. And like, that may be a good person for someone else, but not you. And so I worry a little bit that like accelerated them super fast, and they should all both just take a breath. That's my.
I like Michael because he's a dork, right? Like there's just something really dorky about him, and I tend to be pro dork. And so
he's a little tweaky for me. Like, he's just a little bit too like, I don't know.
I can see that. I really did like the outtake at the end where they were like looking at the stars and like
O'Brien's belt.
Yes.
I have some real concerns about Katie's science education after that clip.
We all thought that. So what I like about this is like, even smart people are dumb sometimes. And like, I really like that we got that glimpse into that. I thought it was kind of funny. Caitlin Bristow tweeted, anyone else feel like cherishing every moment of their life after this episode? And I thought that was funny. So, you know, not
to go off topic, but did you see, so people have been critiquing her about how different she looks from her season. And her response was like, well, I got some fillers, I got some injections, I also put on weight. So yeah. And I was like, it's kind of awesome. Like, I appreciated that. Like, she wasn't like, yeah, I don't know. It was very matter of fact. And
yeah, she also was like, and I aged, y'all. Like,
yeah. People change the way they look. Their physical appearance changes for various reasons. I don't know why people got to jump on and, rake her across the coals for it.
She's also kind of a dork, and I appreciate it. And she's like an unexpected dork, because I do think that there's something about her appearance that makes you think she's going to be this like
sophisticated,
prim and proper woman or something, and she's kind of dorky, and I love it. So we do go on to have this drama between Aaron and Thomas. The other guys seem to jump in and also dislike Thomas.
Hunter takes up the mantle. He's Hunter is now going to call him out in the group.
They unite as a unit again. I appreciate that about this group of men, that they're like, we are in this together. Except for that guy. That guy's out.
Until he's gone. And then like, I feel like they're all going to look around and be like, oh shit, now we're all against each other. Like no one brings together a group of people like a common enemy. And then once a common enemy is gone, it's like, uh-oh. Like,
so they can't succeed at.
Yeah.
They can't succeed. So predictions about what happens next. What do you think Blake's there for? What's going on? What do you think?
Blake loves her. He has an honest connection. She is the woman for Blake, just like Claire and Tayshia. So here's a question for you two ladies in the room. Does Blake set off like red flags? Because I would think that if I had seen his behavior on the other two and I was a potential partner for him and he was like, and now I love you, I'd be like, this guy's he's anxious, ambivalent, man. He is clingy. He just wants, the next person. He's showing up to the first date with 100 red roses and a lock of his hair.
Yeah, I don't, again, sort of love the vibe. Admittedly, like I do think a lot of watching this episode for me was the disconnect between how one effectively navigates the Bachelorette versus like the real world. And so I'm like, I don't know, that seemed weird. But frankly, every dynamic of this like Bachelorette bubble seems pretty weird. So I'm like, I don't know what we want from these people.
So my thoughts is I don't think that Blake is on there to date Katie. I think he's gonna
reasons.
No, I think that he's like on to like host a story circle or some crap. Like I don't know if I think that they've built it up to make us think that he's going to come on and declare his love for Katie.
Attack.
And I think instead he's gonna be like, and I'm gonna be your referee for this game of dodgeball. Like I just think it's gonna be, or like I'm here to give you advice on, I don't know, something. I just think it's gonna not be what we've been set up to think that it is.
Blake shows up to your workplace after the first date with lunch and is very disappointed when it's not something you like. That's who Blake, like, hey, we had an okay first date. I brought you Panera and here's cheddar bacon soup in a soup bowl, in a bread bowl. And you're like, I'm keto right now. And he's like, just eat it. I got it for you. We're in love.
I was at Panera yesterday and there's definitely two people that were on their second date.
Ooh, how was it going?
I was like, I was doing a little, eavesdropping, and I thought it was incredibly awkward and I would not call this guy back, but she seemed to be like way more cool with it than I would have been. Like he opened the door for her or she opened the door for him and he's like, oh, it's a good thing this isn't our first date. And otherwise I would have needed, I don't know. It was cringy. It was great for eavesdropping, bad for them.
I likes to eavesdrop on a good breakup. Like I'll do a first date, but if I can tell people are breaking up, like I'm going to try to get over there because I want to hear it. I want to know who did what, who's in trouble. Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever gotten the privilege of eavesdropping upon a breakup. I've eavesdropped on many a date, but I had thought usually breakups weren't done in like Paneras.
Oh no, I've a couple. Yeah, like at a restaurant, you can tell people are really angry, and you kind of like, they're like, I just don't know where this is going. It's probably good to break up now.
Oh, building the breakups. So that's the name of your band.
I like that. Breakups are way more interesting than relationships. It's like the whole relationship in one really painful conversation.
So let's help out our listeners.
Yeah. Whoa.
And let's hit them with our biggest lessons learned from this episode. So what do y'all got?
Try to not smile too much if you're discussing an awkward, vulnerable topic.
Good nonverbal advice.
You best know the rules. Like, I feel like it's important to know the rules to the game you're playing.
I'll kind of riff on that and say, know why you're sharing. If you're going to share something, know why you're sharing.
God, it's like,
try and communicate your intention through your sharing.
It's like we should co-host a podcast. We're just like finishing each other's sentences. You didn't.
I didn't.
Dang it.
Maybe after another 30 episodes, I'll figure it out. Oh, go team, go. So Briana, any shout outs, last words?
Yes.
Oh.
So, I was a somewhat later minute add to this podcast and had not watched any of the episodes up till now. And so my solution to this was I hosted a party where I invited my parents-in-law who were visiting from California, a friend from middle school who I hadn't really seen since middle school, but discovered lived near me, and someone I had recently met on Bumble BFF. And I got
this is awesome.
An excellent sale on Pokemon cupcakes. So I bought 24 of those. And yeah, this motley crew watched an episode and a half of The Bachelorette together. So I'd like to thank my party attendees. So my parents-in-law, Gary and Marcia, my partner Skylar, who made an appearance, and then yes, my new friend on Bumble BFF and my middle school friend, as well as always a shout out to my mom, who's like just definitely going to listen to this, and I love her so much.
Yes, thank you, Karl, for always being a big supporter.
Thanks, Coral. I'll get you Danelle and Sue's number, and you guys can, my mother-in-law and mom, and you all can just ask each other questions and talk, because Lord knows that's what they do when they're around me.
By the way, thank you, Sue, for the Facebook friending. I appreciate it.
Get ready for some questions and posts and liking of your posts and questions.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Wow.
That dopamine. Yeah. Other shout outs, Briana. Did you get it all?
I think that's it. Of course, I guess the rest of my family, my sweet father.
The other ones.
Who likely won't listen to the podcast. I understand. My beloved brother Ryan has middling taste in wives.
Oh.
Who also, by the way, will not listen to this podcast. Ryan supports me in many ways, but it is not by watching The Bachelor with me or listening to this podcast.
I do want to say, when you were describing the like blonde kid with the like semi bowl cut, that was a lot of the mid-90s for my beloved brother Ryan. And we have
I can see that. I was thinking with his hair, I bet he rocked the Kurt Cobain like.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
I'll be sharing some photos from our childhood soon.
What did you describe him as, Danielle? A Greek god?
Oh yeah, yes. Okay, so here's the thing. I think my husband's cute. I don't know. It's adorable. Anyway, I've got to end this podcast. We've gone over time. I'm embarrassed now. So thank you, Bachademia. What is the name of our podcast? I'm frazzled.
Everybody have a good day. Bye-bye. Thanks, Brianna. You've been listening to Bachademia with your hosts, Drs. Daniel Dick McGeough and Bill Henniger. All opinions expressed on this show are solely the opinion of the person who spoke them. If you like our podcast, please consider following us, leaving us a 5-star rating, and a positive review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, please share with your friends, family, and other ardent Bachelor content lovers. If you have comments or questions you would like us to address on the show, you can email us at bachademia@gmail.com or on the Twitter with the handle @Bachademia. Thanks for listening.